Because the real point, the real focus here is on what God is up to in and through Boaz. That's the most important of all the details. So when Boaz explains things out to Mr. So-and-so right away, he says yes. And then when Boaz reminds him that part of that yes also includes picking up Naomi and Ruth, he quickly backs down. He says, I can't do it. Why? Because it's going to take too much of a bite out of my net worth. Boaz does the opposite. He actually assumes the risk because, like Rowling, he can see the bigger picture, or more accurately, he can better see the beginning point. Because you got to remember, Hebrews here are always going off who God has made them to be and called them to be. And they know that right from the very beginning, God says, this land that you have is a gift to you. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me, but I'm letting you look after it for now. We become its stewards. We hold it in trust. And there were rules into who got land and how it was parceled out. And then when it was transferred over from person to person, there was rules looking after that, making sure that it was all taken care of. But here's what was absent from those dealings. From people who said things like, this is mine. This is all mine. It belongs to me, and I can do whatever I want with it. That wasn't the attitude. The attitude was more like this. All of this belongs to God, and I am responsible to look after part of it. So what we see in J.K. Rowling is what we see in Boaz. That there's no hanging on to what is rightfully theirs. Instead, what we see here is an assuming of responsibility, even if in the process they are subjected to some sort of loss. Because there is a calling on the lives of those of us who identify ourselves as disciples of Jesus to acquire the wins and the losses of the people that we have tied ourselves to. So when you're in with your group, man, you celebrate those wins. You love them. You look after them. You throw huge parties. When someone does well, you honor it. It's great. You're with those people present. But when those same people bottom out and things crash and things aren't so good, well, you're there too. You're present. You're committed through thick and thin. So what we're beginning to uncover here in this story is that God's kingdom is really more about investments than it is about payoffs. You know what we see here in this passage? We see permission. Permission to forge new kinds of families. Permission to say that, yeah, you know what? Families can come together by ways that aren't the normal means. It doesn't have to be neat and tidy and clean all the time. This is permission for us to redefine what a family can be. You know what else we see here? We see inclusion. That Ruth has received the ultimate upgrade. She's gone from outsider refugee to be redeemed, reestablished, and accepted. And then these words are spoken over, and they said, you're going to be like Rachel and Leah. What? The matriarchs of the family of Israel? Wow. So the question for you and I is this. Why then does the author, why does the narrator drop all these names? Why is he giving us this lineup? Why is this important to the story? I'm wondering if it adds up to something. Maybe it's a message to you and I that when your family is messed up, maybe you take it day by day because there's this long game plan that God is up to something. Maybe it's a sign to you and I that all we've ever had to work with are the broken, messy pieces, and that nothing is going to be perfect the way we want it to be perfect. Maybe it's a sign to us that God is always going to get God's way, no matter how badly humans meddle with his plans. Why? Because he is a God who pulls under his wings all the screw-ups, all the underachievers, and all those who have no business being included. No, when we turn that microscope back on ourselves, usually what we go to is, I don't like me. I hate me. Look at the pile of bodies in my wake. Look at all I've destroyed. Look at all that I have broken. I'm not good enough. And then we just exclude ourselves from what God is up to. Let me give you a newsflash here. You aren't good enough. And you'll never be good enough. But you know what? It doesn't matter. You know why? Because Jesus said so. You and me, we are beloved, we are redeemed because of who Jesus is and because of what Jesus has done. Friends, when we read a lineup of names like this, we need to recognize that attached to each name is a story. So trace the lines. Track what God is doing through their pain and dysfunction. And if you can manage it, track what God is doing through your own pain and through your own dysfunction. Because if God can use Jacob and Perez and Judah and Tamar, if God can look after Boaz and Rahab, if God can work through David and Solomon and Ruth, why couldn't he work through you? Friends, the big takeaway for us from the story of Ruth is this, is that our faith isn't about defending anything. Instead, our faith is about proclaiming something, proclaiming someone. To be defensive is to be protective because you're worried about it getting dirty or getting in or not being perfect and clean. Too late. It's already not perfect and clean. But to proclaim is to be resilient. Is to say that no matter what happens, we remember that for now, you and I are between beginnings. That very, very first beginning, way at the start, where God says, look after stuff, and that very next beginning, the new beginning, where God's going to set all wrongs to rights and renew all things. It's also a reminder for us that it's good news. That the good news of Jesus is that he is tying all of our stories together into his happy ending.